Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Fish Market Academy, where we teach how to fish for gains. So in today's video, it's going to be a slightly special video where we just recap what happened in 2021 as well as what I think will be the upcoming opportunities in 2022. So if you are thinking about how to invest in 2022, then this video might be interesting to you. So 2021 was a pretty bullish year, generally speaking. I think a lot of the blue chips went well. Some of the tokens have fallen quite a bit from the all-time high. They have also went up, generally speaking, quite a lot from the bottom or from the start of 2021. And generally, the bulls outperformed the bears. And if you had just thrown everything into Ethereum, you probably did pretty well as well. And it was a year that was driven primarily by narratives, which we'll explore what these narratives were in a bit. As usual, disclaimer, nothing I say is financial advice. Before going to 2021, I think it's nice to talk about 2020 first, because that's like one of the most important year where it kickstarted a lot of this, with the Fed going crazy with their money printing after the March crash. So the BTC halving event was in May as well. It was a pretty memorable event because halving is only once every 4 years. And soon after the halving, and then the Fed started to do QE infinity, I was like, okay, this is the exact thing that Bitcoin was built for. So I was like selling a lot of different stuff to just buy Bitcoin. I think it was around like $4,000 to $6,000 I was trying to accumulate, and that was a pretty good move in hindsight. And then we had the DeFi summer explosion in August, where the DeFi TVL just went up a lot. And then we had a lot of like institutional interest, like MicroStrategy was the main one that was very upfront about it. And we had the ETH 2.0 staking launch, so that was pretty cool as well. We saw a lot of ETH being staked and being taken out of the circulating supply. And we had a bit of the crypto regulations, with XRP being like sort of sued by SEC, which I think should be resolved soon, I heard, but not sure on that. And yeah, I think in 2021, there were a lot of things happening. Primarily, people believe that DeFi will bring the next billion people on board. I think the amount of users in DeFi or in crypto right now is around 500 million, I read somewhere, but not sure how accurate that figure is. And it's definitely possible that in the next 1-2 years, we can see it increasing to like 1 billion users in the world. And the total market cap of all cryptocurrencies rose to 3 trillion, which is a pretty phenomenal milestone. That was kind of the top. So right now we are at 2.3 trillion, around there, but 3 trillion was the top. And I think in the following years, we will definitely exceed and overshadow this. I still believe that in this decade, we will surpass 10 trillion in market cap for all crypto combined, basically everything that's on chain. And the TVL in DeFi surpassed 250 billion, or a quarter of a trillion, which is a pretty impressive number. And the current supply of all stablecoins crossed 130 billion, with UST overtaking DAI. It's the 4th place in stablecoin, but it is the biggest decentralized stablecoin. So that is a pretty remarkable milestone as well, at 10 billion market cap for UST. So I'm just going to recap the 4 quarters and my experience. So this is my experience. It's not going to be everyone's experience, but I just thought it would be interesting to see how I actually experienced the entire 4 quarters. So I started off mainly with BSC, the Binance Smart Chain. It was very confusing because there was the Binance Chain and then the Binance Smart Chain, and it was like, I felt like their naming could have been better, but we just call it BSC now. And it was the first EVM. So it was the first Ethereum fork in a way. And the BNB was a gas token. And that gas token went up tremendously from like $30 to $600. One of the good plays was to get like the Uniswap of BSC, and that was Cake. So Cake was already listed on Binance, and if you go to like CoinGecko, you could sort of see like the user base, because CoinGecko, they would show like how many users, or they project how many users is using it, and you could see it growing relatively fast compared to Uniswap's user base. And you could sort of check the market cap between Cake and Uniswap, and it wasn't even close. So I thought Cake was pretty high potential. So I think I got Cake at around $2, and I sold it at around $40. This was a pretty good. I think there was a lot of hype, and it was just like way too overextended. So I decided to sell all of it at $40. So one of the things that I learned from Cake was that user growth is a very important metric when looking at valuation, which is something that I will use again in subsequent further analysis, which I'll talk about later. And after that, I remember the Robinhood saga happened, and everybody was complaining that you cannot like stop people from buying or selling a stock, because you could only sell GameStop, but you can't buy it, and that was like super rigged, and then people were really unhappy. And then it was during that time where Mirror Protocol was getting a lot of attention. So I think I bought Luna around $2. That was my first buy at $2. That was a pretty good price. And I fell in love with the Terra ecosystem. The UI UX for the MetaMask and the Mirror Protocol was all really, really smooth, and everything felt really fluid. So I thought Luna was probably going to be one of the big players in 2021, and was quite convinced that I probably should buy more. Yeah. Yeah, and I also took part in a lot of the SBDO Ponzi's. So SBDO, I can't remember what it stands for. I think it's Basis Dollar. It's a fork of Basis Dollar, which you guys might call it Tome Fork, which is a bit funny to me because Tome wasn't the original one. SBDO was more original in the sense that it was like the first fork of Basis Dollar, which also failed, and SBDO also failed. Tome Fork hasn't failed because technically Tome Fork did had a issue and an exploit, and then it failed. But the original Tome Fork also had some exploit, I remember, and it kind of like went to close to zero. But then this billionaire Harry came and sort of revived the project and saved the project, and it's doing very well now. But apart from Tome Fork, every other of this algo stablecoin fork has kind of failed due to there not being intrinsic demand for the token itself. Like there isn't any demand for Tome itself apart from the money printing before features were built. But I think Harry is trying to build a lot of features on top of it, so there will be more intrinsic demand, and therefore this I don't want to use the word Ponzi, but this protocol can probably last for a while. But I do recommend taking out capital as you get profit, so that you can lock in your capital, because you never know this kind of things can go down, and they do go down quite fast usually. So the reason why I'm being cautious is because I made a lot of money with the original Tome Fork, right? And then I don't think I took out capital, and I got greedy and I put it all back in, and then it crashed, and then I lost it all. So I just want to caution people to make sure you take out the capital and some profits, so that you don't end up like that scenario. It was also during the first quarter where I think GameStop went up a lot, and I bought like quite a number of GME before this whole saga, because I thought it was potentially undervalued, or at least someone told me it was undervalued, and I just paper handed it. If not, it would have been worth $1 million. So you win some, you lose some. That's just part of investments. So moral of the story, if you are in a meme, probably not the best idea to sell everything, because you don't know how big the meme can be. But definitely take out capital. That one is like a no-brainer. I know like Suzu says if you're up 2x, you should double up. So like invest again. But that's not recommended for meme coins, I feel. For very strong fundamental projects like Luna, I have doubled up a lot of times. As it kept going up, I kept buying more. I think that makes sense for projects that are fundamentally sound. So in the second quarter, it was a pretty fun quarter, if your definition of fun is crying yourself to sleep. So I'm going to explain why and what happened in 2021 second quarter. Polygon was already out, and I think it got popular with the Aave incentive program. So basically, you could borrow and lend assets, and then you get paid to do so in the form of Matic tokens. So that is really awesome, especially for whales, because if you are like a whale and it's a bull market and you're holding on to a lot of like cash, for example, but you don't want to touch any type of speculative asset, you could, like, for example, buy $1 million worth of like Ethereum, and then after that put $1 million worth of Ethereum short position on FTX, so you're basically delta neutral, and then you just take the Ethereum and then you put it into Aave on Polygon, and you would earn the Aave, you earn the Matic rewards, and then after that you borrow ETH against your collateral, so you're basically net on the Aave platform, and they just keep looping this deposit and borrow, and then you earn a lot of free Matic tokens. And if you're a whale, this is pretty awesome risk-free money, especially at the start where there's not a lot of people providing liquidity. So I think that was one of the reasons Matic started to get popular, when all the liquidity came in, and then people started to see this liquidity, and then developers would go and build around this liquidity. And there was a lot of goose fogs happening on the Matic ecosystem, so those were pretty fun while it lasted. And the Matic ecosystem was also really cheap. The transactions were basically free, so you could just keep on making transactions and not to worry about the gas fees, unlike in Ethereum. Or BNB was also around $1 to $2, so it does add up. I went to check bscfees.wtf. I think I spent over like 4,000 in BNB fees, so it does add up after a while. And as April approached, we had the Coinbase IPO, which was a really big event, and there was a lot of hype around it. I think usually when there's too much hype or the extreme levels of hype around a certain event, usually it's buy the rumor, sell the news. And in this case, for the Coinbase IPO, it really was. My only problem was I definitely did recognize this as a top. I just didn't expect it to be such a huge drawdown, so I didn't sell a lot. I didn't sell enough. And that's a very important lesson. When you're trying to take profit, it's important to know how much profit to take, right? There's times where you want to take like 5% profit on the way up, and times where you want to take like 50% profit if you think it's very topish. So that's something that I've learned in terms of profit taking allocation. And then once the crash came, I think Luna had a lot of cascading liquidations, which sent the price from $22 all the way down to $5. And I thought that was really undervalued. Luna had a fantastic user experience, and the upcoming Columbus 5 was probably going to be a huge catalyst. So I thought at $5, it's probably going to be the buy of a lifetime, and it really was. I mean, if you bought Luna last year, it was the buy of the lifetime. But back then, when Luna was already a protocol that had Mirror, had Anchor, and the risk of Luna price actually going really, really low for a long time was really low, especially with big catalysts coming up. So it was a really good buy at $5. Or at least I thought, and it did actually work out, so that's pretty good. One of the bad things that happened was that I did get rugged in the second quarter while I was on a cruise, and I lost all my BNB. But sometimes that happens, and you just gotta move on with life. But the market decided to rug me even harder by crashing really hard in May, so I lost half my net worth within this short period of time, and I was ouch, in maximum pain, and thought that was the best time to start a YouTube channel. So that was how this YouTube channel started, in case you're wondering. It was sort of a place for me to share the things that I've learned and to research in a more structured way so that I can actually share and present it as well. So hopefully this YouTube channel did add value to some of you guys, and if it did, then that's pretty awesome. So in the third quarter, we were still in the bear market during the beginning, and I was wondering what was good to buy, because during a bear market there is still a lot of discounts, because the bear market won't last forever. And I felt like no matter what, this top at 61k or 64k was not the ultimate top, right? We definitely would continue to go higher. And while everyone was in the pits of despair, I was trying to find what is a good buy. And then I saw this tweet on Twitter where someone was talking about how AXS continues to grow in user base. So I went to think about it and thought that made sense, right? Even in a bear market, people are still going to be playing games, right? Gamers don't stop playing games just because the economy is in shambles. So the same for XC, I thought was probably going to happen. And I rotated money into AXS around $4, which was a pretty good call in hindsight. And after that, the bull market continued after the B-Word conference, where Katie Wood and Elon Musk was sharing about how to get institutions to adopt Bitcoin and why Bitcoin should be on their balance sheet. And it was also around this time where I was thinking, what should I buy during this beginning of a rally? And I used Solana back in Q1. It was really unusable back in Q1. You had to use this solid wallet, and then you had to add in individual tokens in order to actually interact with it. And the whole UI UX was horrendous, which was why I thought I probably should buy some, because when something is pretty horrible to use, it probably can only go up, assuming there is a team of motivated developers that will make it better over time. And of course, back then it had institutional interest already. So I was rotating back in around $40, where I thought the UI UX has improved greatly with Phantom Wallet, and there were a lot of more retail users adding in, and it was really fun to use. Fees were fast and cheap, and it's enjoyable. So I'm currently still using Solana as well, and I think it will continue to do well in 2022, but not like a 10x or 5x kind of returns anymore. But I will probably still hold on to Solana just because I think the buying demand will probably still be there in 2022. Then came around incentive season, where most of the layer ones had their incentive program. So you had your Avalanche Rush, you had your Phantom incentive, Cello incentive, Algorand, Harmony, so much more. They all had incentives, so we call it the incentive season. And that was a pretty fun season where a lot of these layer ones went up a lot in price, and a lot of applications started to get built in these ecosystems. Danny season was also around this timing, where you had really interesting innovation like Spell, Time, and Ice. So Spell is a bit like MakerDAO, but more innovative and has features that are better, like you can deposit LP and borrow against them. Time is a bit like Ohm in terms of the bonding mechanism to raise funds, but they are kind of like an Alameda Research or like a hedge fund or investment fund, as well as trying to build a RPG game on top of it, from what I heard. And then Ice is like a auto compounding vault similar to Yen, but multi-chain. So a lot of these have their own innovation, which I think will probably continue to do well in 2022. But what didn't do so well was ETH's price compared to some of these L1s, because if you take a look at any of this layer 1 price against Ethereum during this period, Ethereum basically just went sideways, and all of these layer 1s continued to go up and up and up. So if your bag was mainly in Ethereum, you kind of felt like, why are you holding this Ethereum, which is kind of like a stable coin, while everything else kept going up? And it was a pretty good sign to actually rotate some into this layer 1 place, which did pretty well as well. So in the fourth quarter, Manga was born when Facebook rebranded their name into Meta. And I thought this was a pretty good signal to start looking at GameFi or Metaverse projects. So the rationale is basically, if you take all of the market cap of all Metaverse tokens together, before Meta was created, it's at X dollar. But when Facebook turned their name and rebranded into Meta, Facebook is worth about 950 billion, or basically almost $1 trillion. That is added to the market cap of all Metaverse tokens. So it's now X plus 1 trillion. So every single token, right, that has sort of like a recognizable market share of the Metaverse space is now heavily undervalued in terms of market capture based on valuation. So a lot of them started to go up like crazy. I wasn't very familiar with all the smaller tokens, but I do know of Gala, Sen, and Mana as the main ones, and I went with Gala and Sen. Mana not so much, because I did try out Mana, and the game kind of feels very empty when I was trying it out, and it just didn't seem as exciting. Whereas for Sen didn't really have a product out back then, and I love it when a token has no product, because when they got no product, they can sell hopes and dreams, and hopes and dreams can be worth a lot to people. And if you just look at Cardano selling hopes and dreams all the way from a few cents to $3, you know that it's probably something that can do well. I'm just kidding to anyone that holds Cardano. I also hold Cardano, disclaimer. Gala was already live with a product, but I thought the game was actually pretty decent, so I went with Gala as well, and I think Gala and Sen did quite well, so that was a pretty good call. Then a friend of mine introduced Juro to me, or also known as DeFi Kingdom. It was around $1, and I thought it was really cool. It has like a game and a DEX inside the game, so I invested heavily into Juro. I farmed it really aggressively, and then I also minted a few Gen Zero during the event. But then after that, Juro kind of just like died down between $1 to $3 for quite a long time. But during the second part of the fourth quarter, suddenly there was a lot of people talking about it, as we had like a full-blown GameFi season, and then Juro just flew from $3 all the way to like $15. I still think Juro has a potential to continue to appreciate because of how competent the development team is. They have a very ambitious roadmap, and they are really good at delivering and keeping the price of Juro high by adding a lot of like hype with all the snapshots and all that. So I think the Juro team is really smart and really strong, and I definitely think Juro will continue to do well in 2022. Apart from that, I think most gaming projects are in a bubble, but the space is still really nascent, so I really believe that this bubble can continue to become an even bigger bubble in 2022 with more games coming out. And AAA crypto games like Illuvium is going to come out in 2022, and that will bring a lot of excitement, a lot of attention, and that will also bring a lot of money, and this whole space will probably continue to grow in 2022, even though it is probably going to be a bubble. But a bubble is one of the best ways to make money, as long as you go in and go out in time. So something to take note of. Don't be afraid just because it's a bubble. Just be nimble when it's in a bubble. Ohm fork season also happened in Q4, where everybody was just forking Ohm due to its success, and it really printed a lot of money if you were early. But essentially, most of these Ohm forks were just a really bad way of raising funds. I mean, it was a good way of raising funds, but they all had pretty bad execution on the things that they wanted to deliver. So most of them ended up being a bubble, but I think some of them will continue to stay. I think some of the interesting ones, obviously as the pioneer will live on. Time will be interesting to see how that plays. Danny has a lot of following, so I think Time will probably do well. Climber is also something that is interesting with real world applications, so I think that might do well. Roam DAO is really interesting because you are combining a few sectors into one. Roam has like GameFi elements as well as a Ohm DAO type of Ponzinomics in a way. And Ohm itself is not really like a pure Ponzi, it's just a way of raising funds. So after the funds is raised, it's really dependent on how the project actually execute upon the plans that they had with the funds that they raised. And I think those that have a strong plan with strong team to execute will probably do well in terms of being an own fork. And then we sort of had this period of the Wolf game season where it's similar to Werewolf. I didn't really play that too much, so I can't really comment much about it. But there was also this Node season, which I also didn't really participate, so I can't really comment much. But I do know that Node season is still, that the Node protocols are still around. So probably something that I'll look into if they continue to do well. Single-sided options were also getting popular with Katana launching on Solana and a few other ecosystems launching their own options vault. And then ZK rollups like your Dask, your Matic started to get the narrative, and layer 2s like Near and Metis and Boba also launched and started to get popular. So I think these are narratives that will probably continue into 2022 as well. One funny thing is that the year started with SBDO Ponzi for me, which is like your Tom fork, and it's going to end the year with the same SBDO Ponzi with all these Tom forks flying around. So some learning points that I learned this year is that there is a lot of musical chairs in crypto, and it's very important to be like nimble and react fast when the narratives start to change. So when you start to see something is getting talked about but not really mainstream yet, you really want to do a very quick but shallow research just to see whether it makes sense and decide to like ape a certain amount of money that you think makes sense. And this is one of the ways to keep on ensuring that you're on your toes and help to maximize gains because you're early. One of the most important thing in crypto is to be early. So stalking the various social media channels like Twitter, Discord, Telegram is a good way to stay on top of narratives and to maximize your gains. And if you're not in a group, I really strongly recommend to be in some kind of group because that's how you share knowledge. There's just way too much going on in crypto to be able to do all this research gathering yourself. So if you're in a group, then you share research and share alpha insights with one another, and we're all gonna make it. Another thing is that RugDog is pretty useful, and I think people should use RugDog before aping into anything, or learn how to read contracts if you are more of like the techie person, because you never know, this can actually save your funds. And obviously security things like using burner wallets, making sure that you diversify your funds into a few different wallets just in case. These are all pretty useful security tips that I learned, and probably will save my ass in the future. Another really strong learning point is the Ethereum narrative and the Ethereum killers. So Ethereum, as we know, is really not easy or not fun to use because it's slow and it's really, really expensive. And that's why all of these other EVMs that came out, like your AVAX, Matic, Phantom, they're all doing really well. But I think they wouldn't have done so well if they didn't have an incentive program. And this incentive program made it such that liquidity came in first, and then that attracted a lot of developers to basically build upon this liquidity. And then when there are more developers building, there are more apps, there are more users that will come in to use the apps. So I think all of them have their own little community now, and it's not going to be something that ETH 2.0 would be able to steal back easily. So I think these layer ones and also called ETH killers will continue to do well in 2022 as long as they continue to have their own community, their own culture, and their own set of developers continue to build upon it, because they all have their own unique infrastructure. And I'm not technical enough to know which infrastructure or which way of consensus will win, but I definitely think that all of them will probably still do well in 2022, even if ETH 2.0 launches. But that being said, I definitely think that ETH 2.0 launching will do really well for ETH's price. And if you are sitting on a lot of profits for all of these layer ones, I think it's wise to consider moving some back into Ethereum due to the strong risk reward that Ethereum brings to your portfolio. I also think that GameFi is one of the ways that the next billion users will get onboarded onto crypto. We've saw the success of Axie Infinity, where people can play games and earn a living. And I think if more and more GameFi products are able to find that balance, that really difficult, intricate balance, but if it is found, it's going to make a really big attraction factor for a lot of gamers to come in to play and make the ecosystem vibrant, and that can probably bring in a lot of users, and people will be like managing different players, and then there will be guilds being formed, and this kind of approach, creating a whole sector out of it, will probably be one of the ways that the next billion users get onboarded. And they can also get to learn about DeFi from them, because if you see like DeFi Kingdom, it's actually a place where you can learn about like impermanent laws, you can learn about swapping trustlessly, you can learn about liquidity pools, you can learn about like staking and all that. And if a lot of these games will have all these features, then learning about DeFi through all these games will probably be a good way to get more DeFi people into the ecosystem. So lastly, I just want to share about what I think are the possible narratives in 2022. So the growth of DeFi 3.0 or Web 3.0, sorry, is probably going to be something that we continue to see in 2022. I think a lot of DeFi protocols have done extremely well when they first launched, but they have sort of died off in 2021, even though I think a lot of them continue to have strong fundamentals, like your Aave, Uniswap, Banker, Balancer. These are all pretty strong protocols. And we might see a resurgence in 2022 because they've all sort of like dropped a lot, and they're all at decent discounts. But we shall see. That's just speculation. Like I mentioned earlier, I think GameFi will continue to expand greatly in 2022. So definitely want to keep a lookout on all possible games that look like they're going to launch a new game, or look like they have a lot of like interesting backing, etc. And we all know the future is multi-chain. So I think to connect this multi-chain future, we need a lot of bridges. So bridges will probably be a very popular narrative. Things like Rango, like AnySwap, or TorChain or Rune, probably might work in the background even to facilitate some of these multi-chain or cross-chain transactions that might happen in 2022. I'm not sure if that will actually work in 2022 for all this stuff happening in the background, but definitely see it as a possibility in the future. And at one point in time, bridges will become the narrative, and they will go up a lot. So that's something to keep a lookout on. And this year, with the success of Luna, where it has went up some crazy amount of multiples, I think there's going to be a lot of competition coming up, and some of the competition will include like Vader or Sperex or Reflexer. So these are something to take note of if you are a Luna holder. You want to keep track of what your competitors are doing, and see how you can sort of like learn from them, collaborate with them, etc. Because like, although we are an algorithmic stablecoin or decentralized stablecoin, we can still have partnerships like how we work with MIM, Spell, Magic Internet Money, to create integration so that multiple parties benefit, and that's probably going to be good for the whole ecosystem as a whole. This year, we also saw a lot of DAOs being formed, but there is just not enough infrastructure tools to manage DAOs, because managing DAOs are it's a pretty complicated process. So I think next year, we probably will see more protocols or more initiatives in the form of infrastructure tools to manage DAOs. We also have ZK rollups that have been developing for quite a while now, as well as other layer 2s that are appearing. I'm not sure if ZK rollups will really be the limelight in the next year, because when you want to integrate ZK, if your protocol is already in existence, it's not so it's not so easy to actually port over into ZK, because you have to recode a lot of things. But if you are just going to bring it over or port over into layer 2, it's a lot easier because you don't have to recode as much. So I think layer 2s might be taking a lot of the market share from the ZK market share in the beginning, as we realize that ZK may not be ready, or protocols are not ready to adopt ZK. But I think in the future, ultimately ZK will be one of the strongest layer for crypto. It's just a matter of timing it. So I think layer 2s is also something I look at. So layer 2s include like your Metis, your Near, Boba, Arbitrum, Optimism. And if you haven't used any of these protocols, I think do try to use them. They are like Ethereum, but a lot cheaper, but still expensive. It's about $4 to $12 per transaction. on these platforms. So it's not really cheap, but it's definitely a lot cheaper than Ethereum, and they are using the security of Ethereum. So it's not like a sidechain like Polygon or like other EVMs like AVAX, where it's really not really using the security of Ethereum. ZK, if you're interested, I think Dusk is a pretty interesting ZK layer 1 with smart contract capabilities that has gone up a lot. Polygon also has ZK rollup, so Polygon probably be a very safe play as well. Mina is another token that's quite interesting. It hasn't gone up that much, but I think they're going to launch stuff next year. Just not sure what they are going to launch. But probably if the ZK narrative comes back again, Mina might be doing well as well. And in the second half of 2021, we saw decentralized options increasing in volume. So next year, we probably will see more options protocol gaining market share. Things like Ribbon, Katana, ChessFi, etc. These are single-sided staking option vaults, which are doing quite well. And we have like options protocol itself, like Lyra, like Dopex. These are probably going to gain more volume in the future as well. And I think next year really could be the year of the Cosmos, because there seems to be the narrative that is in place already, and it's sort of ready, where you have the various networks and chains all deployed on IBC, and you can start to interact with all of these different chains easily on the Cosmos ecosystem. So I don't know whether Atom will go up in price, because Atom might not be able to capture the value of the activity happening in the ecosystem. But if people choose to make Atom as the proxy of the success of the ecosystem, then Atom might do well. But we shall see how that goes. And at the end of the day, many other narratives will come and go, and it's just important to keep your eyes open for them, keep your mind open-minded, because the risk reward is pretty favorable when there's a new narrative that is new. So it's important to try something when it's new, because the upside is really high if it becomes something that is mainstream, and the downside is just probably it goes sideways or it goes down and you just lose what you put in. But if it's a 20x versus losing 100%, you just need to make that bet multiple times, and if just one of them hits, you probably make back your money and more. So that's why I think being in crypto is one of the most exciting area for investment, because of the asymmetric nature of your investments. And of course, next year, we have the Federal Reserve tightening their policies. So it's probably going to be something you want to be paying a lot of attention to. So maybe consider reducing your leverage, reducing your loans, and be wary during certain periods, like your FOMC meetings, where they are going to announce that they are stopping the taper or increase interest rates, things like this. Probably will shake the market, but in the long run, I think crypto will probably do really well this decade, and it's probably going to be the place where I spend most of my investments in. So I just wanted to end this video with a special message. I do have a Patreon group, and really thanks everyone for supporting the Patreon group. It has grown to almost I think 100 members already, and we are all sharing alpha and insights, and a lot of the stuff that I discovered early on, I share with the community. So if you want to be early into a lot of these new narratives, do consider joining. I will probably consider increasing the price next year, because I think there is a lot of value that I'm trying to provide. And I really want people who are dedicated into the crypto space to join this community, and then we can share alpha with each other. And I think it's going to be a pretty fun and exciting 2022 as we sort of expand this group and add more stuff and more content and value. And if you want to help support, if you found the content useful so far and you want to be in the next narrative early, then definitely do consider supporting me by joining the Patreon group. And yeah, I think that's about it. If you found this video useful, do remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys again next year. Bye!
Baby fish, baby fish,